Hello, I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and I want to thank all of our moderators, expert guests, and solution sponsors for participating in these Inside Jam panel discussions. This has been a big year of changes with the launch of the all-new, always-on InsideJam.com community site. For the past 4 years, everyone here at Solutions Review has been leaning in to build the Insight Jam into a celebration of enterprise technology, with best practices, expert analysis, and solution showcases. And we want all of you to join us there to keep the jam going into the new year and beyond. If you haven't joined Insight Jam, please do. And if you already have, take a moment to invite some of your colleagues. And again, thank you all for being here and enjoy today's discussion.
Solutions Review presents Inside Jam, a social media community for enterprise technology. Hello and welcome back to Inside Jam Live. My name is Jonathan Paula. I'm the Director of Multimedia and Events here at Solutions Review. And I have once again assembled a great group of panelists to discuss our next topic as we close out hour 6 of our day dedicated to business intelligence. And that topic is data observability and the AI moment, tools and practice. Gentlemen, thank you all for being here. It is a pleasure to host you. And I know our resident chairman of the board of experts over at InsightJam.com, Robert Eve, you're going to moderate for us. But before we get to the guest intros, I'm going to let you do some opening remarks on the topic.
Thanks, Jonathan. Data observability at the AI moment, tools, best practices. So let's get started with the elephant in the room, generative AI. IDC in their recent report called Are You Ready for AI Everywhere? Says half the large enterprises already see generative AI disrupting their business. So no wonder that boardrooms and enterprise IT groups all over are attacking and thinking about this subject. It's really a hot topic. According to Gartner, 1 in 5 organizations already have generative AI pilots or production applications. 70% investigating. IDC says 60% are investigating the exploration phase. And IDC says by 2027, 143 billion will be spent on AI. So the question really isn't whether or not to do AI. The real question is how to do AI well. And rather than boil this ocean, we're going to really focus with a set of experts on the subject of data observability and how that will help you as you make your AI efforts. Why focus on data observability? Well, frankly, everyone's data is a mess. It's scattered everywhere, on-prem, in the cloud, vendors, partners, customers. The data pipelines themselves are very complex. Definitions, rules, incomplete, inconsistent. And governance, well, that frankly remains an elusive goal. So data observability is now a mainstream capability, a set of software, frameworks, best practices. They aim to provide a comprehensive understanding of your data, as well as some tools to help you resolve your most challenging and critical data issues. So let's review our agenda. We're going to start by defining data observability and trying to understand its benefits. Then we're going to explore the relationship between AI and data observability. And then we're going to get practical and really focusing on tools, best practices, starting points. Let's meet our panel members.
Awesome. Thank you. Bryce here, based out of the Bay Area. I've spent a decade or so in the data space, starting with enterprise SaaS companies, so with like Workday and Looker, and now in product management here at Monte Carlo, where we kind of pioneered the idea of data observability and are kind of category leader in the space. And excited to kind of talk through this today. I saw it kind of firsthand in the past at other tools, where in companies where data quality was such an issue, as you just mentioned. Everybody's data is a mess, and so it was so excited to see our founders kind of focused on this problem space overall, and excited to share a little bit more about what we're doing in this space today and how we're attacking it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Power, formerly the Managing Director and Head of Data Governance at State Street Global Markets. And I would have to say I've been a data quality person from the beginning. And I just find the whole evolution of, data quality, data governance, data strategy, master data management, analytics, and now AI endlessly fascinating, because everyone's definition of what is good differs. A lot of times the business, is really the final expert on what good looked like. And, how do we encode that? How do we make sure it happens? How do we automate? And I've been a data quality tool proponent for a long time, and it's been interesting watching the tools vendors expanding their scope to full observability, not just legacy data quality definitions, and also starting to incorporate AI, which obviously is a big plus. So I think we're going to talk more about that later, but it's definitely an exciting thing to see happening.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Diamond. I'm president and CEO of Contour, the largest independent provider of information governance consulting services. We help organizations develop, and we think moving forward, 2024 will be the big tug of war. I think there's a tremendous demand for organizations wanting to use AI. At the same time, the ability to use their AI compliantly, defensively, ethically, and data observability and the quality of the information you have to make those decisions within both your corpus and also within your large language models within AI are going to have a tremendous impact on whether your organization will be able to use AI or whether you'll be able to use it compliantly.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Max Lukichev. I'm co-founder and CTO of Telmai, the data observability company. Most of my career I spent building large-scale analytical systems, real-time monitoring systems, and data quality. So this topic is very dear to my heart. As a founder of data observability company, definitely have a lot to share and learnings through the years of experience.
Hey everybody, Nick Magnuson here. I'm based out of the Salt Lake City area, and actually today I'm joining you from reInvent in Vegas. I work for a company called Qlik, where I'm the head of AI. Qlik is a end-to-end platform that spans both data analytics and AI, serving about 40,000 customers globally. And that includes anything on the data integration side, from data replication to change data capture, quality, governance, cataloging, as well as observability, all the way to the far end of the spectrum of using that data for application build-outs, visualization, reporting, predictive analytics, automation. So I think from my standpoint, we have the full end spectrum, and data observability obviously has downstream impacts to all those things. So I'm very excited to share my perspective on that today.
Thanks, guys. Let's begin with just some real focus on data observability itself. Bryce, what's your definition of data observability, and how's that different than the traditional data management quality kind of tools and techniques that everyone's adopted so far?
Yeah, I think there's the approach of how you think about approaching observability, but the definition really comes with the overall understanding of the health of your data and the systems that process that data, right? And I think, just to jump in directly to like how it's changed, right? It is, from my perspective, there's two major shifts that we've really seen. There's the kind of, as Dan kind of outlined, in like some of the more legacy quality tooling, a lot of like rule-based and more manual efforts. Think of it like writing unit tests, right? Well, with AI and machine learning, we've been able to actually go forth and automate a lot of this and set thresholds dynamically for customers, right? And make this a much more scalable effort. But also with the movement to ELT as a whole is a big factor in this too, right? Where we're processing a lot of these jobs and systems directly within cloud warehouses or data lakes, lake houses, and so making sure we kind of can approach this system holistically and downstream to things like Qlik and so forth from there. So really looking at that kind of complete end-to-end picture.
Max, what do you think what Bryce had to say? How would you add to that?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of those points. I would just add that the observability itself is a very broad concept, right? So in every company with whom we are talking, they have slightly different understanding. For some, observability about understanding, health of the data warehouse, the tables which are there, how they're being used, how much money is being spent, where the problems happen. for other teams like data engineering teams or application teams, it's about, is the data I'm delivering of good quality? It's kind of data quality, but on steroids, in a way that, with the velocity and complexity of the data we see now, old approaches, like rule-based approaches, are no longer scaling. You cannot define this many rules and that fast, right? So you start employing observations of the data and start doing predictions and trying to see where the problems are and helping people finally operationalize those pipelines by automatically remediating and helping the data flow, the good data flow.
And switching gears from the definition to what kind of problems people are solving. Mark, you're out there in consulting world, working with a lot of different customers. What do you see as the problems that they're trying to resolve solutions with these kinds of solutions?
I think that part of the problem been around for a while. A lot of organizations have data lakes or data warehouses, and they've learned that there's personal information in those data lakes. And we've seen a lot of organizations struggle with the polluting of their data lakes. I think the problem now with the world of AI is just getting much harder. When I look at data observability, we really talk to our clients about what is the data, what is the sensitive content within this data, both personal information, other types of corporate confidential other information. What's the data provenance? Do you have rights to this data? Where did it come from? Where did it go through? As well as sort of the ethical components of your data. Should we have access to this versus going to produce the results we want? I actually think that moving forward, that the whole area of data observability, I think a lot of organizations have been sort of casual about, hey, I don't know what's my data warehouse. I think that's becoming a bigger issue. And the final point I want to make is, it's not just about the structured data. It's not just about the data in the data warehouses. If we look at a lot of the AI programs, they're looking to leverage semi-structured content, emails, unstructured content, as well as the structured data. And so to some extent, it's becoming a much more bigger, challenging, but even more important problem.
So you're really kind of a governance lens, some of the ethics and provenance and things of that nature, but just this expanding usage, moving to unstructured, and also moving away from just a casual approach to a more programmatic approach. Did that capture what you were saying?
Yeah, and I think that this is more than just an IT problem. This is an IT, this is a legal, this is a compliance and ethics. However, I think IT professionals, we have to be they're going to be asking questions for us that we have to be able to answer on this data. And so, again, we sometimes want to narrow our focus and make it a very simple problem, but I think where the world is going on AI, we have to make it a bigger issue. And we as IT professionals need to be aware of really what's our data, where did it come from.
Got it. Dan, let's get the user's perspective. You coming from State Street, large organization, data everywhere. I think we described that problem. How do you view this, the challenges that you're trying to resolve with data observability?
Well, someone brought up the scale problem earlier, and I think that's a very important thing to keep reminding ourselves of, as well as security and privacy. And I think what we're finding is, State Street has roughly 3,000 databases. In my business unit alone, there were about 260, and it's just too many to get down to that level of detail of manually creating business rules. So I like the idea of leveraging AI to at least give us a starting point to kind of profile the data and automatically create rules. I mean, the scope of observability is quite a bit bigger. That's still kind of covered under legacy data quality. But I like the fact that, we've opened up observability to look at things like, are we optimizing our systems, the compute and storage? Are we optimizing our costs? Are we managing our costs? Are we looking at who the users are and what the resources are? As we create data products and then ultimately, reports and dashboards and AI models and so on that depend on those data products, are we really getting the use out of them that we thought? Because they're going to proliferate. They always do. So if you can step back and say, hey, at some point, we're not using this set of 12 models and the underlying data sets that they are built on. So maybe we should think about shutting those down.
So focus and prioritization. Well, we've talked a wide range of things falling under data observability. When it comes to a wide range of things, Nick, your company, Click, provides a wide range of capabilities. What's your thinking here on data observability, this evolution in the tools and techniques, and kind of the kinds of problems you see your customers solving with data observability?
Yeah, data observability, I think, as previously mentioned, the scope of that is increasing over time. With the advent of AI and generative AI specifically, the movement into unstructured data creates a whole new data observability challenge. How do you monitor unstructured data sources? How do you capture changes in those? How do you bring those to users' attention? And then more specifically around the data quality and the integrity of that data, which is a term I like to use in this area. Generative AI presents new challenges around private information, potential bias in the data, discrimination potentially in that data, as well as anything sensitive. So, monitoring for those things, capturing those things, dealing with them, remediate them is a new challenge that wasn't necessarily as pertinent as it is now, as generative AI becomes the focal point for a lot of the use around data and the ability to do it with a level of conviction and confidence.
Pretty expansive. Bryce, circling back, anything to add on what's been already discussed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Dan, you mentioned kind of and had me thinking a little bit about the idea of like cost management with performance, right? A couple of years ago, we had a real big focus on just preventing the downtime of data or inaccurate data, right? And that's what most people just cared about because interest rates were low and money was flowing, and so we wanted to just get the data out there and the products out there. But now we are seeing a focus too on observing these systems, right, and understanding where are we, wasting money? Are we getting an ROI on these systems that we're actually building out? Right, they're not inexpensive, and so being a little bit more focused on the efforts that we're building into these core data platforms and making sure that the health of them is solid, but also that we're using them in responsible ways and getting the ROI out of the systems we build. I think it's important to think about.
Max, anything to add?
Yeah, sure. To the point of what Nick mentioned about AI and observability's impact on this, one thing which a lot of people often overlook is adoption of LLMs is wild, right? So you talk to any company and it's happening, and only maybe 1% of people will be training or fine-tuning the models. The others will be using something out of the box. But it doesn't eliminate, it highlights even more the problem, the quality of the data which is being served by AI. And all components, ethical component, the quality component, ownership, all of that has to be taken care of, because as soon as we start shifting to the new generation of interfaces powered by Gen AI, those things will start surfacing like big time.
Great. Well, we've covered pretty expansively the definition and also some of the problems. Let's talk about the bright side. What are people achieving? What are some of the benefits? What are some of the successes? Mark, what do you see with your clients?
Well, above and beyond the traditional data governance uses, I think with the advent of AI is really going to be a boon for a lot of organizations. We're seeing it literally all different parts of the organization. It's a very, very generative AI is a very powerful technology, which its day has seemed to have come. I remember graduating from college and we were talking about AI and not much seemed to happen from AI for 30 years. I'm dating myself, of course. I think the world is changing on that. However, I think that I think use of AI is going to be greatly restrained on your governance capabilities. And the good news is, I do think this is doable, whether it's not exposing sensitive information and unstructured data, whether it's making sure there's not personal information in emails or in other database systems. I think that if organizations are smart and they design in a good governance approach, they can have tremendous use of AI that will give them a tremendous competitive advantage. I'm not, and so my argument today is not so much, hey, I think AI is going to be a big thing. I think a lot of us feel like that, but rather those organizations that can navigate the rapids of governance and navigate the rapids of poor data and data quality and other issues, those are the ones that are going to be the first to market and see tremendous market advantage for that. So if you're smart about this, you could be very important for your organization.
Yeah.
Dan, that was just teeing you up.
Yeah, it triggered something in me. First of all, I think it's about trustworthiness. Is the data itself trustworthy? That's always a question. And I'm sure we've all had the experience where you work really hard on a dashboard or a report or some other product, and you put it in front of the executives, and they're like, I don't trust this. There's something off. That doesn't look right. And they can always tell, by the way. The other part is the ethics, and that's something I'm personally very interested in. The idea that the model could produce an answer, which is technically right in terms of being based on the inputs, but you know what? It's not ethical. It's causing harm. And how can we, prevent that by more thorough testing of the models up front, and making sure we don't get into another situation where we have like Apple Computer and Goldman Sachs issuing credit cards, and the husband in the couple always gets a credit limit 10 to 20 times higher than the wife. Those things weren't anticipated, obviously, but if you sat down and thought about it, you would want to test for that scenario, and they obviously didn't. So in the corporate world, there's a problem called dark data. 70 to 80% of data is not used for anything. It gets generated and created and stored, and that's it. No one ever touches it again. So there's a lot of hidden value, but you have to make sure it's right. And even from a data retention perspective, you have, regulations that say you should get rid of data after, say, 10 years. And when you don't, you have a huge risk, because if you get, in some litigation and they, send you a discovery motion for certain data, you have to turn it over if you have it. And this may be stuff that legally you could have deleted. And the other part about observability is, how do I know it's been deleted everywhere? So now you're getting into GDPR and data subject requests, and being able to show that you have a program in place to make sure the data has not just been deleted in the kind of one original point of entry, but it's been deleted across the board. And so there's lots of sophistication of requirements that is increasing. So it's good to see the sophistication of the tools increasing. And the idea of can AI help the data? First of all, I think the data observability and trustworthiness of the data is the foundation for AI. I don't think you can build a great model on bad data. It's the same platitude we've heard for forever of garbage in, garbage out. But I also think it's very encouraging to see, now we're starting to apply machine intelligence to do things that previously would have required human intelligence, but it was fairly wasteful, grungy, dirty, manual intensive work that no one really enjoyed. Looking for duplicates in a database of 600,000 records is not fun. So machines are better suited to do that, and if we train them properly, they can be of great help.
That's a really interesting point, Dan. Is almost really brings up the next question. We'll go to you with it, Nick. What's the relationship between AI and data observability? As Dan says, better AI will come from better data observability, because then we can get that higher quality data, better ethics around that data, better governance of that data. But the problem that we've discussed is also so complex. Could AI itself help us address the complexities that data and enable data observability solutions? Dan or Nick, what do you think?
Well, I think I'm 100% in agreement with both of those statements. So in fact, it's probably not as a question of can it really has to. So as Dan mentioned, data is the foundation by which you build AI models. And if that data is not of the highest integrity, then your AI models are always going to be either in question or prone to error or producing falsehoods, hallucinations, whatever the use case may be. So That foundation has to be in place. Organizations that have invested heavily and prioritize that as an ongoing effort, I think in the long term are going to be in a strategic advantage, because that'll always be the bedrock on which their AI strategy sits on. Dan also touched on a topic that I'm really glad that he did around trust. Use of AI is going to be met with a ton of skepticism immediately by any part of the organization. And what's going to break through that trust is whether the people that are consuming those models can trust the underlying data, the inputs that went into it, the level of care and safeguarding that was in place to make sure that those models can work in the real world. So from that perspective, I think the data is the foundation for AI. But at the same time, given the robustness, the size, and the speed at which organizations globally now are bringing data in, there is no way in which you can, I believe, fundamentally govern, monitor, and observe that data without use of AI. For things like anomaly detection, has the quality of the data deteriorated over time? For AI models, and specifically, like the feature set that's been used to train those models, if that starts to shift, that often is the first indicator that your model is going to not perform as you expect. And so being able to observe that, identify that, and take action on it is critically important, so that you don't use these models, particularly in a programmatic way, where there's being decisions or actions taken that are off of erroneous or data that is no longer conforming to the way in which the model was originally trained.
Bryce, let's add something here. What are the tangible use cases of AI technology within data observability to make data observability run better? Anomaly detection was one of the things Nick mentioned, and watching quality drift. What are some other things you're seeing that your software does?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was exactly where I was headed with it, right? It's we think about it kind of as a chicken and egg situation, right? Especially when you think about like a generative AI model, like if you're serving a data product, right, that is a generative AI model to customers or stakeholders, right, you need that data to be of quality. But as we think about it, maybe a way to look at it would be with things like metadata. That is something that we could just look at and over a time period, a time series, and say, look, if we saw anomalies using AI to detect these things, that might be an indicator then of data not being of quality for that data product down the line, right? And so it's important to be able to use AI even upstream within the observability stack. And that's what why it can be kind of a chicken and egg situation, right? It is, of course, critically important to have that quality of data within the AI, but it can be used upstream too.
Max, how about tell me and what kind of capabilities you're applying to AI inside your product?
Yeah, when we are talking about AI for data observability, one thing we need to keep in mind that as we touch this point, like there are thousands of tables, thousands of databases, and data is always garbage. AI definitely has an upper hand here in summarizing better, analyzing better the vast amount of anomalies that are being produced to highlight only the important ones. And the quality of those findings and the relevance of those findings heavily depend on the quality of the AI models we are building, right? So in this sense, data observability helps building better AI models, but also uses sophisticated AI models in making sure the right metadata or information about the quality of the data is being produced as the outcome of the data observability tools.
So Max, a quick follow-up question to that. If your system identifies some anomalies, that's one thing, and it's good to know. How do you help resolve those?
Yeah, there are many ways of doing this. Like one thing is bringing this as an insights, right? And that's where, if I give you 5,000 alerts, it's not going to be useful to you. The good summarization, good correlation of things is very important. But even more important to think is trying to operationalize the flow of data, the pipelines, right? When we know that issue happens pretty much every day, every hour, how the systems can help automatically resolve those things, which are resolvable, and keep the data flowing, reducing this burden on the teams constantly being in the firefighting mode when the issues being detected, right? So the over alerted situation.
Dan, you mentioned State Street, which said like 3,000 different databases. So let's say you had great data observability tools, really AI-driven, uncovering using metadata, observing the metadata, and uncovering challenges and differences. So you get this pipeline report of 10,000 things wrong with your data. How would you deal with that, or is that even a realistic?
Well, that's my dream and my nightmare at the same time. The idea is that you have a metadata management repository, a data governance platform that knows about all your databases. And so obviously that's a lot of work too. But part of understanding the reliability of a given data set that's being used on an AI model or a report or a dashboard or whatever is knowing, have we governed that underlying data? Are those, whatever, maybe it comes from 45 different source databases. Are those source databases all governed? Because if they're not, it doesn't mean I can't use the data, but I'm certainly going to be less confident in it. And, do I have descriptions? Do I understand the lineage? How many hops did the data go through to get to where I'm going to use it? And, the more I hear people talk about AI governance, like it's a real thing that's here today. And obviously, I don't think that's true because the underlying data isn't fully governed in most companies. They have a huge challenge. There's a lot of manual steps out there to be done to get that data to be fully governed. And, they have to work their way. They start with the most critical items first, and then the next most critical, and then everybody else. And when you have a scale problem like that with a lot of manual work required to get there, it can take, years, 5 years, more. So you shouldn't go around thinking, okay, my AI is governed and my model risk is managed if the underlying data isn't governed and managed. And so that's a lot of work. But I don't think you'll really have reliable, trustworthy, ethical AI without it. So I do think there's a big dependency of AI on data observability and on the underlying governance of the source data that is being drawn from.
Mark, let's go to you. A quick interjection here.
Yeah. So I'm gonna
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go. I'm gonna disagree with you a little, Dan. There's this feeling somehow that programmatically I'm gonna be able to push a button and do my AI governance, and I agree with you. That's we're not going to be able to do that, and too often IT professionals, we just want to sit behind the console and push buttons. But I'm going to disagree with you. There is AI governance, and it's a combination of policies and processes, engagement of stakeholders, and making sure that we do the data governance and the information governance. And then finally, we have a process to be able to, a defensible process to say what we're doing. And you alluded that a little bit earlier. I would, yes, if you just want to have a tool to solve the world's problems, that could be a long time. But on the other hand, we see organizations today setting up effective AI governance processes, which is more than just technology, to be able to put this together. And again, we need to be, we're never going to be perfect. These are inherently imperfect processes. They're inherently imperfect data, obviously. But we want reasonable good faith efforts to say, hey, we've done the right job. This is good data. It doesn't have any personal information, other sensitive information. We're using it in an ethical way. The results are right. I think that is doable, but I think those processes have to be designed very early in. If after you got your whole AI, you're saying, okay, now let's throw a process, an AI governance on process, that you're going to have a very long road, because you may have to go back and redesign a lot of things that you did before. But if you can set it up, and this is doing AI governance. Yeah, AI governance is new, but it goes back many years to good governance processes. We can apply good governance processes. So I'm going to make the argument, I think this is very doable today.
I'm not saying it can't be done. And I actually agree with you that the time to do it is right from the start, because if you put those processes in place early on, you don't have to go back and remediate hundreds of models later. But don't forget, AI is very smart. And, the models, you don't have to feed them a gender flag or a name field or a zip code. They will discriminate based on the transactional data that you do feed them and make decisions about credit limits, for example, using my earlier example. There was no bad data fit into that model. It was just a historical pattern of, hey, men are more creditworthy than women, so let's figure out who the women are, and then we'll assign lower credit limits. That wasn't programmed in. That fell naturally out of the data. So I don't think we're going to anticipate every situation. We're still going to have some bad outcomes, even though we have the AI governance processes in place from the beginning. We'll just have fewer surprises.
And just a quick add-on to that, Dan, I agree with you on that. And one of the results may be by having a good AI governance processes is we can't do everything that we want to, even though theoretically it looks like we can do this. Maybe we can't use the AI yet to be able to do that. And I tell you, from a risk perspective, that's much earlier to say, hey, we can do this, but we can't do that yet. I'd much rather find that out in the beta versus having the FTC or somebody else saying, you guys are in big trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things too, I think sometimes people, they think they need to use every piece of data available. And what they don't realize is, well, a lot of that data is not indicative. It's not going to be used by the model. It's not going to correlate to any outcome. So you should just drop it. The bigger risk is carrying along data and giving to the model that you don't actually need. And maybe the model does something funky with it. If you figure out you only need these 14 fields and you have 96 others, get rid of those other 96 that are not going to actually give you an uplift in the predictability and the outcome that you're looking for. So I think it's a matter of common sense and principles and design guidelines and processes like you're talking about. So I think we can do AI well. I think we just have to think about, well, what happens if we don't govern it? Because governance for a long time was kind of a dirty word and people didn't like to hear about it. They thought it was bureaucratic. And what I found is it ends up increasing productivity so much that having a properly governed data ecosystem is a huge productivity booster for the developers that come along and want to work off of that data. And I think the same will be true of AI.
Well, I think too that it's just to add, you're just having a problem that I would say is even a step kind of further than even some companies are, right? And even just with even serving the right data. And I think to your point, like we should encourage people to cut back on the data because inevitably things are going to happen. Even if we remove 90 of those fields, that's going to help us cut down on the landscape of what could go wrong with that piece of it. And that's where I think we need to still help a lot of companies out there is start small and be focused on the core kind of use cases and data aspects of it.
Yeah, show me that you need it. Show me that it improves the predictive output, and make a defense of why that should be part of your model, and then we'll add it. So that's a governed approach right there. You're basically making people argue for the fields the features that they need to add to their model because it improves or gives them an uplift on predictions.
Does that make sense to you, Nick? What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, a general best practice in using predictive models is to, make it as small of a list of features as possible so the model can generalize. Otherwise, you have risk of overfitting or, spurious type of situations. Now, with you shift the landscape from traditional AI to, let's call it generative AI, and the corpus of data that these models are trained on is much larger than anything that we've been able to contemplate in prior iterations on this. So in some respects, I think that dynamic changes a bit there, but it doesn't certainly decrease the need for ensuring that data has, again, high levels of integrity. And I think, to Dan's point earlier in the conversation there, like processes that need to be established are part of the government's framework. Like if you don't have a process that, interrogates the data for potential biases and other things that, you never want to feed into it and serve up to a model, that's a process thing. That's not necessarily a technology thing. The technology can enable it, but organizations have to adopt that process and make that part of the framework for a way in which they govern both the data and the AI component to it.
Max, anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with these points, and just want to add one thing is that protecting the models as they are being rolled out and used on an ongoing basis is a very important aspect. We shouldn't be overlooked. And making sure that they are not drifting away from the intention is a very big topic and not an easy one.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Agreed.
Well, I think we've made a pretty good case for why organizations should get involved in data observability if they're going to try to do AI. And we've also talked about AI inside the data observability just to enable it. Let's explore doing data observability right. We've talked a little bit about processes already, people and some of the technology. Based on what you guys have seen, what are good starting points? We'll start with you, Bryce. Where's a good starting point, or any other best practices you might recommend?
Yeah, sure. I think there's kind of a couple of different ways to look at it. Traditionally, we found a lot of success looking at it at the storage layer versus the pipeline, right? What matters is not did your job run, it matters is what the data outcome actually was. How does that data look as the job finishes and is then getting served to a report, to a stakeholder, or to an AI model, right? So starting there and looking at the outcomes, but then also being, I mean, we've kind of actually touched on it quite a few times, I'd say today in different ways, but being focused on specific use cases and making sure that data products or stakeholders are driving the use cases that you're focused on observing that data. Boiling the ocean just to me just isn't a great way to start, especially with the scale of some of the data sets that folks have out there.
Max, what do you think? What are some of your observations in terms of good starting points and capabilities and focus areas?
Yeah, data observability. One thing about data observability, it can get very expensive if it's not done right. So definitely focus on the use cases and making sure that you're not trying to, like Bryce said, not boiling the ocean. Where things kind of settled up for us well is exactly that. Working with particular use cases, particular data teams, solving their problem of accurate and trustworthy data seems to be having a kind of a good reception and kind of something which is easy to translate into operationalization in the end, right? That's something which is definitely impacting the having an effect on the ROI of the company which is buying the tool.
Great. Mark?
Yeah, I'm going to take a higher level step. I'm going to say that, first of all, you really need to engage your key stakeholders. This is not only data governance IT folks, but also your legal, your compliance, as well as your business units. I think another important part of it is organizations need to create effective AI governance policies. What does it mean? What do we need to do? I would then like to see them start thinking about what's the process. Okay, if we have some generative AI, what's our process for developing this? How do we make sure it's good? And then how do we test it? And how do we get everybody comfortable with this? I know to some, this sounds a little bit like I'm being bureaucratic, and it's sort of the opposite. What I'm trying to prescribe is the fastest way for you to go to market. The sooner you can get everybody on board and everybody in agreement, and this is what we're trying to do. The final component of this is that there's a fair amount of non-prescription from a regulatory perspective. The rules aren't coming out. And then likewise, a lot of the generative AI models are non-determinate. I mean, they you get different answers depending on what time of day you run it, which is crazy, but that's the way it works. You've got to have trust in your process. You have to say, hey, we really tried to do the right thing. This is how we did that. We took the right corrective steps to be able to do that. You're never going to be able to get to perfect. Perfect doesn't exist. But if you have good processes around it, it's actually going to make it much faster and much more quickly. You may be a little slower at the beginning, but when you want to go out to market with this, you'll be much faster and you won't be stopped. And I'll say what I started out with. I think 2024 is going to be the big year that a lot of organizations embark on these generative AI projects only to get stopped maybe at the 10-yard line because, we didn't think about that. And again, the we didn't think about this isn't so much the technology, it's all the things I just talked about.
Nick, what would you say?
Yeah, I would add one more component here that often doesn't get talked about at the beginning of building out sort of best practices in this area, and that is, once you're post implementation and into like using data observability and deriving value from it, and then hopefully expanding to more use cases, the one thing that I think smart organizations do up front is they build in a reinforcement or sort of a feedback loop. So because data observability is all about making sure that the data is the right level of integrity so that people downstream from it can make use of it. And getting feedback from those stakeholders, as mentioned, at the outset, is great. But getting that continual feedback is really important so that as they're observing, idiosyncrasies in the way in which the data comes to them and how they're using it, that is fed back into the upstream processes that are meant to make sure that data again stays at the highest level of integrity. So I would encourage companies as they think about that to try and build that into the process early on, because it's rather hard to try and then shoehorn in at the last minute where you're okay. Now we need to get some feedback, and that process wasn't established up front.
And Dan, what would you say in terms of good starting points, best practices? What's your advice?
Well, I like the idea of looking for the stakeholders that have the most pain. You want your ROI to be as strong as it possibly can be. So the more expensive the alternative of not doing anything or not using AI, then those are the ones that you want to start with. Obviously, the low-hanging fruit. But things like anti-money laundering, financial crimes, compliance, if you look at the vast amount of data that most corporations have compiled and maintained and store, even something like, hey, we're putting this out in the cloud, how can we encrypt it in a secure way? There's lots of new technologies coming along to protect data. I mean, I would love to find a way to kind of cut the hackers off at the knees and say, you can hack our systems, but you're not going to find anything you can use because it's all encrypted. And to be able to use data observability to kind of, watch that entire ecosystem and find ways to optimize those flows and the costs and, the people using them, I think it's a great step forward. Observability for me, I'm more excited about data observability than I've been in probably 20 years. Because it's taking the idea of data quality and expanding it out, fivefold, and saying, look, we can really look at everything now. We can look at the security and privacy and governance, and use AI, and at the same time using those tools support the use of AI and Gen AI in particular. Hallucinations are a huge problem. Companies will not feel like they can trust generative AI until the problem of hallucinations is eliminated. And that's something that I think observability can help with a lot.
I would just echo that point. Like the majority of people I talk to in the generative AI space are in POC phase, and they have failed to go from POC to production because they have found that either their data strategy does not allow them to use the data in the way in which they meant to, and which is often exposed through those hallucinations. And I've seen this movie a couple times, going back to the automated machine learning and when that came on board. And now we have generative. It's the same thing. If you can't trust the model, like when they first use it, it's very hard to get them to try it again. Right. So I think, Dan, you made a good point there. That is really the crux of the problem, is that if these models don't perform as the way they expect, it's very hard to get them to try it again.
Yeah.
So let me try to summarize across the group. There was a lot of P's here. Certainly, we talked about process, data observability processes enabled by AI, AI policies. We talked about the people, engaging the right people, legal, compliance, business. I thought that was a great input from Mark. A lot of prioritization, use cases, go to the pain, the most essential data, don't boil the ocean. Really interesting point on post-implementation from Nick, get that feedback loop. And then we kind of close with some protection and security. So anyway, some real P's in terms of people, process, policies, priorities, post-implementation protection, and then even early POCs. So we really success. So we nailed it on that front. Gentlemen, thank you for sharing your expert insights today and experiences. This has really made a great Insight Jam Live audience opportunity. You guys did a great job educating all of us on what observability is, why it's a critical capability, why it's essential, and also your practical advice on, all the P's. I think that was very helpful and good takeaways for successful implementations. Speaking of implementation, you probably want to think about getting some software along the way, and we have some software vendors on this call, so I urge you to investigate their offerings. Thank you to the audience for joining us. Also Monte Carlo, Contouro, Click, Telmy, who did I miss? And Dan for joining. Go to the Insight Jam Solution Showcases to learn more about the vendors. And of course, you can always go to their websites. At this point, let's send it back over to John.
So I wanted to come back in before the end of the show as we wrap things up and provide each of you an opportunity to give some self-promotion, whether that's your own personal LinkedIn profile, your company's solution, a blog, a podcast, whatever you'd like. We'll go in counterclockwise order, starting with Nick.
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Nick Magnuson, associated with Click, of course. In terms of content that we espouse to be kind of the thought leadership in this area, we do have blogs and leadership content you can find on our website, click.com. Again, given the breadth of our product portfolio, that'll span a lot of different areas, all the way again down to the data integration, observability, data quality, our AI product portfolio, as well as our analytics. So a lot of different things. I think that's some of the value that we provide, is we have a very comprehensive perspective in this area, and a broad cross section of customers that have various needs and various challenges that hopefully relate to the crowd here.
Excellent, thanks, Max.
All right, so yeah, if you would like to connect, always can reach me out on the LinkedIn, Max Lukichev. If you would like to learn about the product, Telmy, our website, telm.ai. We are the data observability platform with an edge on automation of remediation and going beyond the high-level analysis, like deeper into accuracy, trustworthiness of the data, validity of the data. So if these are in the scope of your problems, check it out. On the website we have a lot of blogs and product description. Anytime you can reach out to us and ask for the demo.
Excellent, thank you, Mark.
Yeah, so at Contouro, we are purely strategic consultants. The world of AI, you've got a fast-moving river. Can you get in your kayak and navigate the rapids? We help organizations do everything from AI governance policies, AI governance processes, procedures, and not only from the technical perspective, but also especially from the legal, the compliance, the risk, the privacy perspective, helping organizations put together whole programs and really be successful, get out of POC, as we talked about, and go to market with a very effective, compliant, defensible, and ethical AI solution.
Thank you very much. Let's go over to Dan next.
Thank you very much for having me, by the way. I'm currently conducting a job search, so anyone who wants to contact me about a senior data leadership role in financial services, healthcare, high technology, you name it, I'm very open. You can contact me via LinkedIn, Power D, or Dan Power in LinkedIn. My email is powerd@hubdesigns.com. And anything having to do with data strategy, data governance, data observability, AI, those are all big interest areas of mine, and years of experience in that area. I had my own consulting firm for 10 years before joining State Street, and now looking for my next chapter.
Right on. Thank you, Dan. I don't think I've
Thanks,
ever heard a job pitch before on the show, but I like it. Use the platform.
Just caught me at the right time.
Absolutely. Bryce, how about you?
Yeah, I wish we were in financial services. We have to hire you. Thank you to the audience and for having us here. You can reach me on LinkedIn as well. Be helpful. There's not too many helpfuls out there, so you should be able to find me. And we'd love to kind of work with you and your company if you're interested in data observability as well. We're excited to be a leader in the space, have 300 plus customers using Monte Carlo in production today to make sure that they have that quality data. And really, it's just about making sure that the stakeholders or your customers have trust in the data you're providing. So we'd be excited to partner with you.
Speaking of partnering, thank you again to Monte Carlo for sponsoring today's event. Thank you one and all for your time, attention, and expertise today. It's been a pleasure listening alongside the audience here. Speaking of which, if you came in at any point during the show and you missed a portion, you want to go back and rewind, you can watch the full replay of this panel and all the other 17 events we're hosting this week across the Solutions for YouTube and LinkedIn channels. But for now, that will do it for this group. Thank you again for watching. We hope to see you right back here tomorrow as the Insight Jam continues into its final day dedicated to data protection. Until then, have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.